the marketplace that couldn't distinguish a customer from a supplier. Employers produce jobs, vendors advertise them. So why are job seekers the products? Hi, my name is Sarah Trumbull. I'm the founder and CEO of the Job Applicant Perspective and, of course, anonymous user reviews for job ads across the U.S. and the future of HR tech. Yeah, I'm running a paradigm shift. So, I like to meet people where they are. So this comes out in written form in my Substack, but I also put it in video and audio format as well to reach a wider audience. I will get started and see what you think, and feel free to engage on this topic. Imagine walking into a Best Buy looking for a laptop. Instead of helping you find one, Best Buy spends its energy helping Apple find better customers. Let's play a game. Let's look at the last 25 years of the online job market. Leave almost every aspect of the data you see exactly where it is. Keep everything you've ever learned about supply, demand, incentives, and markets. Keep the first principle that markets should organize around their customer. Now, change one thing, just one. Ask whether we've accidentally misidentified who the primary customer of the job market actually is. Let's see what happens. Who this is for. Business owners who spent years hiring people but occasionally found themselves wondering why the online hiring process feels so much harder than it ought to. Job seekers who have looked at modern hiring and thought, surely this wasn't what the internet was supposed to do. Economists, policy thinkers, and labor researchers who have spent years carefully documenting labor market puzzles without necessarily agreeing on why they occur. And anyone who enjoys the occasional first principles adventure. Begin at the beginning. As ever, I bring my first principles approach to economics. Let us observe reality and draw patterns from the observations we see. Economic markets exist because people have something of value they might like to exchange for something else they need. I have eggs but no milk. You have milk but no eggs. We can each exchange some of one for some of the other and both be better off for the exchange. Yay! Money is functionally an emergent pre-digital technology to facilitate this exchange. Before cars, trains, and airplanes, transporting every good I might wish to exchange to a distant market was a genuine hassle. I might guess my neighbor wants eggs while another wants bread and a third wants wool. I could haul all of those goods to market only to discover they were actually hoping to trade for cattle. Or I could simply carry coins in my pocket. Essentially, money is part of the infrastructure of the exchange, but it is not the purpose that the exchange exists to serve. In the modern era, we might describe money as a pre-digital data packet. It is part of the social protocol that moves the payload of market value, but it is not the payload itself. And in that regard, the person paying for the value serves the same function in that geographic transaction as the computer server in a virtual marketplace. The payer may be the customer the market's goods were produced to serve, or they may simply facilitate the exchange. It depends on where the value the market exists to coordinate ultimately lands. For example, insurance pays for hospital visits. A parent buys a toy for a child. A landlord buys a refrigerator for a tenant. I buy a laptop for myself. Whether you classify the payer as a customer in 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of those examples isn't the point. The point is that payment alone does not reliably tell us who the customer of a market is. If it did, these examples would not invite the disagreement in the first place. Before we can identify the customer of any market, including the labor market, we first need a clearer rule. So how do we figure out who the customer is? Again, first principles are, if your market's not describing reality, it's worth looking at, we have to be able to derive these from first principles. I genuinely, for myself, used to dislike grammar in high school. I perceived it as an arbitrary set of rules that had to be learned, memorized, and performed at the right moments in order for what I actually wanted to say to be considered. But studying linguistics in graduate school was eye-opening for me. Grammar is not an arbitrary collection of rules at all. It is the observed pattern of language use that emerges from millions upon millions of interactions, accumulating and evolving over time. It isn't built on the whims of a grumpy English teacher. It is, in its own way, part of the contextual history of a population. I apply the same first principles approach that was so transformative for me for the world of economic grammar, because that's all customer and supplier is. It's economic grammar. Reality comes first. If our basic concepts cannot account for the patterns we repeatedly observe, these concepts deserve another look. Walk into a shoe store. Nike manufactures shoes. Are they the customer of the shoe market, or are they supplying the shoes? Walk into Best Buy. Samsung manufactures televisions. Are they the customer of the electronics market, or are they supplying the televisions? Walk into a grocery store. Farmers grow tomatoes. Are they the customer of the produce market, or are they supplying the produce? The pattern is remarkably consistent. Manufacturers supply the wares. Vendors arise to display them. Customers with need, want, or desire of those wares enter the market to acquire them. Now, let's walk into Indeed or LinkedIn Jobs or your local newspaper classified from 40 years ago. The wares being displayed are jobs, job advertisements. That's what they're advertising because that's what's on display. Employers manufacture those jobs. Job seekers attempt to acquire them. If we classified every other market this way, why did our intuition suddenly change here? Why is this mistake so easy to make? My hypothesis is that a cultural norm that arose around the 1950s or so, as near as I can tell, has significantly affected our ability to think rationally about this one particular economic marketplace. Don't talk about your hiring process. It makes you look unprofessional is an identity-based cultural norm so deeply ingrained that good professionals rarely think about their hiring process in public. But sometimes they have to think and talk about their hiring process, especially if they work professionally in the hiring market. As a result, I suspect many well-intentioned professionals inadvertently perform a category error. They think about the hiring process publicly, almost exclusively from the employer's point of view. Over time, we instinctively begin prioritizing every question about hiring, its behavior, incentives, and agency from the employer's perspective alone. Job seeking becomes something we distance ourselves from because it is not the identity associated with professionalism or institutional authority. Status, wealth, and value in our society are not that associated in the same way. And therefore, that economic market is a market with a Schrodinger stakeholder. They exist and don't exist at the same time. Without realizing it, we can become surprisingly irrational when trying to be expert professionals in this one particular field. Instead of behaving like doctors who are deeply attentive to the symptoms of their patients or chefs who care deeply about the experience of dining in their restaurants, this cultural norm produces a very strange outcome. These chefs of the labor market come to define their expertise by not listening to the people eating their food. And in many cases, by not having eaten in restaurants themselves for many years. Literally, this is the definition of economic insanity. Like, you cannot describe yourself as an expert on cancer by virtue of how many cancer patients you don't talk to. You cannot describe yourself as the best lawyer in the world by virtue of the people needing legal help that you don't associate with. You're not the expert until they're your patient. That's where the expertise is. Until the people eating at your restaurant are the people that are you're most concerned with, you have lost access to expertise. You're no longer experts. As soon as your doctors who define their skill or academics who define their skill on parenthood by all the parents they don't talk to, by all the child rearing that they haven't done, you're not the experts anymore. By definition, it's highly illogical. It said I think there is a world in which economic markets are every bit as rational as Chicago booth economists would argue that they are. It's simply that in this one particular area, shaped by this cultural norm, we aren't. As humans, we aren't. My hypothesis is that we've mistaken the supplier of the job market, employers as job manufacturers, for its customer. And even more impactfully, we have mistaken the customer of the job market, job seekers, for its supplier. A thought experiment. Suppose just for a moment that we really had organized an online job marketplace around the mistaken belief that the suppliers of the goods on display were the market's primary customers. Keep all the data exactly where it is. Simply change the framework. Instead of assuming we've correctly identified the market's customers, ask what would happen if we hadn't. What kinds of behaviors might naturally emerge? Would vendors begin filtering customers on behalf of the suppliers? Top 5% of candidates, anyone? Instead of allowing customers to filter the products on display on behalf of suppliers. Ghost jobs emerging because it was really important that the customers did not filter the products on display. Would it seem perfectly reasonable to let those same suppliers advertise products they didn't actually have available to sell? After all, they're the customer of the marketplace. Wouldn't meeting their needs become the platform's primary objective? Would intermediaries continue growing financially even while coordination via JOLTS hires to openings became less efficient? Would we hear persistent stories about talent shortages while millions of capable participants struggle to complete successful exchanges? What would happen over the course of decades? Suppose harm had begun occurring at one end of the market. Would it accelerate and get worse, or would it be addressed? How do these predictions match up with the labor market reality we see on the ground? Does it explain and predict what we see better than the current model, where the roles of customer and supplier are reversed? Check the research. Review some of the academic literature and news around the job market. Keep the same data, but instead of the given interpretations, assume that instead the issue could be that the customers of the market have been mistaken for its suppliers and its suppliers are being mistaken for its customers. Does this framework better explain and perhaps better predict these patterns these observations describe? I put hidden workers on tap talent, the last generation from the Journal of Human Resources, JOLTS hires to openings, as well as some stuff around ghost jobs, and some Q4, some fiscal year report earnings from like Recruit Holdings and LinkedIn, and also what is a K-shaped economy? Because, and Jacobson Kuhla's work in Business Insider. The job applicant perspective begins by addressing our customers' need for a trustworthy marketplace in order to address our suppliers' need to post rules with us. That doesn't make employers unimportant. Far from it. They are the suppliers of the job market and its payers. Of course, they're important. We exist to facilitate the jobs they create and display. Only by creating a marketplace where those jobs are distinguishable from ghost jobs, scam, and other misleading listings can we hope to strengthen the economy they rely on to sell those jobs and ultimately encourage them to post more roles with us. We save our customers time finding the right opportunities so we can save our suppliers time and money filling them. We aren't against either stakeholder. We're for both of them. Instead, we're just suggesting that during the stage where jobs are the goods on display, the marketplace organizes itself around the participant attempting to acquire those goods. The customer. Everything else follows from there. One last thought. Frameworks don't create reality. Reality comes first. Frameworks simply help us describe it. The goal of this thought experiment isn't to replace labor economics or market economics or decades of careful research. It is simply to change one variable. Keep the evidence, keep the first principles, keep the observations, then ask yourself one question. Does the labor market become easier to understand if we classify its participants differently? If the answer is no, wonderful. We've learned something. But if the answer is yes, then perhaps we haven't discovered a new economy. Perhaps we've been looking at a familiar one through the wrong labels. Yeah, so that's it. Pretty sure I called it at Sarah Trumbull, Trumble, for the record, for the history books, stuff like that. But no, it's what it is, because this has all been my lab notebook, but it gets from the nightclub model why there's a nightclub model, because you're not trying to have a market. Anyway, everybody can see it regardless. So stop by the job applicant perspective, non-anesthesia reviews. Please like, follow, share, repost, and engage. Also, just chat it up, because people don't have to agree with me just because I say things. But I always find it interesting when everyone struggles to disagree, or when the disagreement starts being about the tone that you say things instead of the things you say. It's always more interesting to me. That's a fun admission right there. Yeah. Anyway, stop by and just be kind to each other on the roads. It's so wild out there, and I think the internet made the world into a snowstorm. We get through things by trusting people on the roads. So thanks very much. Have a good one.